Senator Edwards, you've suggested that Americans should give up their SUVs for the sake of the environment, but a recent UN study found that deforestation for the purpose of creating grazing land for cattle and methane emissions from cattle generated more greenhouse gas emissions than all the cars and planes in the world. So it's not just the SUVs, it's the COWs. Taking a shot at SUVs was gutsy. You want to take a shot at meat?
Oh, I love listening to Bill Maher. I think that he's correct about some of that. He's such a funny guy. The deforestation is a huge issue. He's absolutely correct about that. Obviously, our trees, our plants play an enormous role in keeping the environment appropriately balanced over time. And I think we do have to, particularly if we're looking at the long-term consequences of what we're doing to the climate, to the temperature of the Earth. Those are things that have to be looked at and have to be taken into account. The one thing that I would add to that, though, is I actually saw a study just over the last few days. I didn't get much attention in the United States, but I think it was done by American scientists, if I remember correctly, that suggested the possibility that the polar ice cap, at the rate we're going now, could actually melt over the next 23 years. I think that is some indication of how serious a crisis this climate change and global warming is. And I want to see both the presidential candidates and myself as the next president of the United States lead the charge on dealing with this crisis in a really aggressive way, because we have to. I mean, first of all, we have to get off our addiction to oil in America. We use 22 million barrels a day, and I've laid out a very specific set of ideas about how we do that, reducing our greenhouse gases by at least 80% by the year 2050, and transforming the way we use and produce energy in this country. But I would add, and this goes to the SUV part of Bill's question, I do think we need a president who actually says to America, you have to be willing to sacrifice, who calls on Americans to sacrifice. Instead of just making a bunch of promises about what the president's going to do, who says to America, if you love your country, you need to be patriotic about something other than war. You need to say, I'm willing to drive more fuel-efficient vehicles, I'm willing to conserve in my home, I'm willing to conserve in my workplace, because all of us have to do this together. I mean, that's real patriotism, to say, if we're going to make America better and bigger and stronger and more independent, if we want to not have our policy in the Middle East driven by our addiction to oil, and we want to actually preserve the planet, we're going to have to do this together.
One last question from me. Since you first ran for the Senate from North Carolina and served one term and then was a vice presidential candidate of the party in 2004, until today, what is the most profound change in your political growth?
It's a really good question, Charlie. It'd probably take more thought than I can give just sitting here. I can tell you what my initial reaction is, that the extraordinary opportunity that I grew up with in America that allowed me to come from nothing to basically having everything now, that when I move around the country, as I have as a presidential and a vice presidential candidate, and I've been doing it for years now, and I hear people's stories, it feels to me like there are millions of people in this country that no longer believe what my parents believed, which is that if they worked hard, their kids would have a better life. And it seems to me that this the old American dream, it seems to me that that dream is distant and dim for millions of people, whether it's because they don't have health care or they're living in poverty or they're just middle-class families that are struggling just to pay their bills. It just seems like things are harder and harder and harder. And at least from my perspective, it's actually the reason I'm running for president, so that those opportunities can be available to everybody. And I think they're really important substantive components of that. But I think that when I began my political career, which you just made reference to, I hadn't seen the way I have seen today how difficult it is for so many people to be able to live the American dream and have their kids have a better life. And I want to be the president that restores that.